Hello everybody, I'm Sal, Joshua, you've met us all before, maybe. So I thought we would do a podcast on the subject of spirituality, such a buzzword in this day and age.
So much dogma, that's what I find. I'm quite resistant to the word and the practice.
Yeah, we both have an axe to grind. In our own way. Spirituality. Keep going. Don't stop your.
Where to begin? We're spiritual beings. That to me.
Okay, what does that mean?
To me, that means that I'm more than just this body. That there's a connection to something higher, somewhere else. It's my soul. And if anything, I kind of like, not that I prescribe to it, but if there was anywhere I fit myself, it would be more the kind of like the animistic or the druid way of seeing the world. Spirituality is about understanding your connectivity to everything and looking after nature and looking after yourself. That is where I've got to. That's spirituality to me now.
Okay. Because we need to appreciate that spirituality as a concept has been around for a long time. And within the Christian religion, to be spiritual is to go to church, to the obeisances, the Holy Spirit.
To me, that's being religious. I think religion and spiritual, there is a crossover, but
eventually there has been a crossover, but that's how it began from the Western perspective.
Yeah.
You know, the origins of spirituality, the life of contemplation, the life of connecting to spirit within an official context of the religion, Christianity. But then something happened, and I think it turned more or less with the New Age.
Mm-hmm. When do you think? When did the New Age begin? Is that the 60s?
It is the 60s. Well, I don't know if it's true, but to me it's the 60s.
It feels like the 60s.
The beatniks, the rebellion. We want to be different. We want to do things different.
Mm-hmm.
Up till now, we've gone through the Victorian era, the beginning of the 20th century. There is this sort of blinkered approach of zombie-like qualities where people did what they were told. Everybody was jingoistic within their own particular country. King and country, queen and country, the flag, call it what you will. But there was that focus of people as one unit because of the indoctrination by the state or by the whoever the ruling elite were. And people just accepted that.
And that idea of control, let's not forget that churches at the time were the way in which people got their information. There were no books, so the only knowledge that they got was about God, but they'd also find out about news from the church as well. So It was a way in which controlling all information and knowledge.
I mean, I've always got a bee in my nose, and
your bonnet.
in my bonnet when it comes to Christianity. Because the history of Christianity has been one of control of the masses.
Yeah.
In conjunction with the government of the time or whoever the ruling were at the time. So they were always in cahoots.
Yeah.
And for me it's always, because I was raised a Catholic, so I was right in there. I know what it's like to be indoctrinated. And they sort of lost their power, and you could see that as the modern world began, they sort of moved towards the third world countries, always for the peasants, always offering salvation. Life will be better once you're dead because you'll go to heaven.
But that ties in a little bit to kind of like the colonialist ideas of kind of like, gentrifying the savages and showing them our ways. So that propagation of that message is what went out, and those missionaries, were really just trying to make everybody like them, weren't they?
Well, the missionaries themselves were indoctrinated, and their belief system of God was what they were taught. It wasn't their connection with spirit.
Yeah.
It was simply the regurgitation of and their belief and their fear that they wanted to go to heaven, and so this is what they needed to do to go to heaven.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily a heart connection. It was a fear connection of belief and indoctrination. And yes, within the Christian faith, there's always been the few who truly made the connection with their hearts. But they were the few, they weren't the masses.
You see, here's the thing. I know some priests and theologians who've really studied and write for the tablet, their religious newspaper, and they don't believe it anymore. They've studied it so much and see through it that it just doesn't. It's incompatible. They're non-believers now through their experience of being, in theology or in, Catholicism.
You're going to get a whole spectrum. I used to go to Hyde Park in my younger days, and there was a priest there, don't know what denomination, and he used to try to convince people that God existed because of the nature of the human being and the marvelousness of the world around us. And he said, this is proof why God exists. And so for him, he followed a different path. And for him, his conviction was very real. It's a difficult one. My Gestalt psychotherapist and trainer in my younger days, he was a priest. Although he wasn't doing churches at the time, but every day, he had his Bible and he'd do his personal whatever he did. He's a lovely man. But nevertheless, he had that sort of conviction and that belief system. And for him, it carried him through to the end, because last I heard of him, he must have been in his late 70s. He'd gone back to the Anglican Church, and he was now doing masses, and he'd gone back to being a priest proper.
Yeah. It's interesting because, my path of getting into spirituality was studying shamanism and going off and doing, the Manichae rites. And then studying psychology, my trainer, he was then getting interested into shamanism. And it's so interesting how many psychotherapists and therapists are interested in this otherworldliness, but not in a Christian context.
The pattern that I see is that as people began to rebel from the status quo, they were looking for meaning beyond the state, beyond the monarchy, beyond politics. And they began to look around, and they didn't like what they saw. And they said, I'm not going into this fight. I don't want to go to Vietnam, the Americas. I'm not going to Vietnam. Conscientious objectors, they began to, because they could see through the facade to the extent that, why do I want to go and die for whoever? And so the movement began. And then, of course, we had the musicians and Glastonbury, and in America they had this big thing in the 70s. Woodstock,
Yeah.
And then it's all drag day, man. And of course, as soon as they began to do mushrooms, so they began to get new experiences. And they didn't necessarily understand what it meant, but it broke the mold, the pattern of their indoctrination. The joke is, that it didn't free them. They changed their clothes, they changed their look, they had new words. Peace, man. But all they'd done was change the scenario. They were still indoctrinated. They were still enslaved. They hadn't freed themselves.
I always see it like the metaphor of a gilded cage. So they've moved from one cage to another, and they think they're free, but they're still inside a cage.
And they recognize each other by their clothes and their new language.
It's another tribe, isn't it?
It's another tribe. Because humanity needs to belong, which is the essence of indoctrination. This is how they get us.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing more fearful or anxious making for an individual than to be ostracized from the group.
Yeah.
And we see it again and again. And so they think they've freed themselves, but no, they've just changed the scenario a little bit. Because there is no true freedom in the mind, in the beliefs. The freedom only comes when we actually connect with our hearts. That's the only chance we have of freedom.
Yeah.
Up till that moment, we just keep regurgitating from different hymn books, So the New Age movement, it's really interesting. The New Age movement. And I've got to be in my bonnet about the New Age movement.
Me too. Because it's bypassing, and it's indulgence, and it's curiosity, learning and feeling good, and but you're just kidding yourself, and you're pushing that on other people, and then you're telling other people about all these, and it's just propagating.
A little while back, I was looking for new people that I could connect with to do podcasts with. I was looking on YouTube, and there's this woman who I connected with, and I realized I don't want to do this with her because she spouts all the right words, but it's not real. She's now doing a new type of indoctrination on people, and I'm trying not to say too much on the subject, but I was left with a bad taste in my mouth. You know, I don't want to deal with this person. And for her, it had become another way of earning money. So it had become a business model.
And it's a form of exploitation, really, isn't it?
It is a form of exploitation in a way. And, you know, everybody deserves to make a living.
Yeah. But it's when you position yourself as some guru or, you know, teacher, and you've got this secret, and then you're sharing this knowledge of other people, but it's inaccurate. It's not going to help people in the long run.
And the world is full of them.
Yeah.
And this is part of the New Age movement. There are so many. I mean, I see this so often, and I really struggle with this because then I say to myself, well, who am I to make such a judgment?
Yeah.
You know. But I see so many people who are spouting so much rubbish, in my opinion. Well, actually, it's not just my opinion. Charlie concurs. But I'll say in my opinion. The spouting, and it's all things that they've picked up from other people. So someone initially had this idea, they had a glimpse of the truth, they blew it out of proportion, that little glimpse of the truth, they blew it out of proportion, a whole system developed out of that, and then it gets shared on other people because it's so easy, other people, you know, love, light, a little bit of meditation,
positivity.
A few angel cards.
Become a vegan, don't eat the meat, pure thoughts, don't swear. Yeah. So much judgment.
Yeah, well, because I have a judgment when I'm...
but there's, you know, yeah, but there's a difference, I feel, isn't there, you know? You know?
Well, I have to believe, and I have to accept that there is a difference.
For me, it's telling other people and preaching, and I think, you know, we can have a message to share, but it's about understanding where that other person is at, and you know, making sure that they fully understand it and can integrate it and you know, do something with it, opposed to just being told and therefore leading it. They need to find their own direct experience with it.
And that is the crunch of the matter, that human beings only learn through experience. Gurdjieff, so my little favourite, he would say that experience is the food for the soul, from his way of talking at the time. And I concur with that, because to actually have experience, all the three centers, all the parts of our brain need to be engaged in the world. If all the three centers are not engaged, all we have is knowledge. And knowledge is very ephemeral. It comes and it goes. You know, you read it one day, you've forgotten it the next.
Yeah.
But experience is the distillation which goes into our system, into our subconscious, call it what you will, deep into our psyche. And we don't need to know. Once we have the experience, it's ours for life. We have an understanding in the world.
Yeah.
And most people, what they have is knowledge, because they're not fully present, they're not in the world. And they're so heavily indoctrinated that they're inflexible in their perception. They're inflexible, they're rigid in their thinking, they're rigid in their relationships with people. And
it's a lot of acting, isn't it? Performance, the facade, opposed to just being. And, you know, I find that so many people are doing this, and you latch on to something and it's feeding the ego, it's enjoyable, and you feel like you're doing some really good work, but I just think you're kidding yourself, really. And when I started out on spirituality, I was told all of these things, and I started believing all of this stuff and incorporating it into my life, and smudging my room and the purity and glass bottles of water and the whole shebang, and, you know, making sure that my chakras were cleared every morning. I was only having pure thoughts and thinking positive thoughts and sending out positive thoughts to the universe and love, and making sure I'm giving to receive, and, you know, and it's actually, when I had a direct experience, all of that just went by the side, and then I didn't need to do anything anymore. And it's because I could feel it. I was chasing after something that felt unobtainable. So therefore, the more pure and spiritual I make myself, the more I'm going to reach that point. So already I'm coming from a place of lack, and I need something, and I'm after gratification, really. And this experience happened to me when I was cooking dinner for my godkids. You know, a really humble thing. And something very profound happened to me that gave me an experience that wasn't every day. That to me felt like a spiritual thing. And then, you know, when I went to go and like train with healers in Bali, you know, I met some I saw a different perspective, because I was expected to be taught things, except I was gardening and cooking and going out in nature, and it was about just getting on with life. And these great healers that we're meeting would never call themselves a healer. They were gardeners or painters, or, you know, they look after the bees. There was a connection, an expression of their love in the world. That to me, you know, really shifted my whole perspective on what spirituality was about, being humble and just being a nice person, and you know, helping each other and helping myself.
I'm not too sure about the word humble, because it's got connotations of suppression of one's psyche.
No, for me it's about keeping the ego in check. Because when I was in Bali and I was doing my trip...
Who keeps the ego in check?
My soul.
Your soul doesn't...
No?
No.
So what is keeping my ego in check?
Your ego. What else is there?
Is it, can it...
No, your ego doesn't need to be kept in check. Because again, that is a judgment.
Yeah.
I prefer the word being ordinary.
Humble.
Just be an ordinary person.
Yeah.
You know, don't go searching to be special.
Yeah.
A lot of spirituality, a lot of the new age thinking, it's all about being special in some way or other.
It's an elitist level, isn't it? It's another division. It's.
You know,
I know something you don't know.
yeah. So if we're just ordinary, because that's what we are, ultimately that's what we are, we're just ordinary human beings. And everything we need is within us.
Mm.
All we need is to be ordinary and to experience the world.
Yeah.
Just be in the world, just experience. Not judging, but be, and you can only be in the heart.
Mm.
There's no other place to be from. And then we're just ordinary. See, we don't need to keep the ego in check. What happens is that we have moments when the ego comes and gets a bit haughty or whatever, but then we notice that and then we laugh. Yeah, we don't take ourselves seriously.
Yeah.
You know, we all have our moments when we lose the plot, but by and large, we don't take ourselves seriously. That is how we keep the ego in check, not through control, because control is just ego controlling ego.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're doing that, we're not in heart. Yeah. I like being ordinary.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, when I was, because my whole life has been in spiritual practices of one sort or another, with one group or another, yeah. And after my year with the Gurdjieff group, and I went back into the world, towards the end of that, you know, by now I was 27, and towards the end of that, a new guru had come into the scene to take over the group, because the leaders were lost. They'd lost their head person, and they were lost, and they were looking for someone else to. And this guy who'd come from, he came from America. He'd sort of learned all the Indian way of being a guru. And I remember being there one time and thinking, I don't want this. I don't want someone telling me what to do. I don't care who they are, you know, who they think they are. You know, they may have more knowledge, but I don't want to be told. I don't want to be. He was very domineering.
Mm-hmm.
And I left there and I was having a bath at home, reflecting on all of this. Bear in mind that I started when I was 17 years old, and I was really, first of all, I was into the gurus, the Indian gurus. And realizing that up till then, I thought that I was training to be a guru.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I don't want to be a guru.
I was always chasing enlightenment. That was my goal. The goal was to open my heart and reach the higher levels of consciousness, and to help people heal.
I was fortunate because I began that way, and from that Gurdjieff group I then went into healing, and I was in there for quite a few years, and then from there I went into psychotherapy, and from there I became an acupuncturist. So I had all these different ways of looking at the world, and what I realized was that I was fucked up. I was desperately fucked up. And so my focus was on healing myself, not on chasing being a guru or a teacher or anything like that. I wasn't looking to be anything special. I just wanted to fix myself. And that took a long time. I mean, I'm not 100% fixed now, but it took a long time in my life. and I realized that the truth of being a human being lies in being in the heart. But to be in the heart, we have to clear the decks because there's so much accumulated rubbish. So anyway, that's enough about me. So
Being ordinary and humble.
no, I'm not. I am not humble.
You say ordinary, I say humble. Right, semantics.
Yeah. There's absolutely nothing humble about me.
So what is true spirituality?
Being ordinary.
There we go, end of, thank you.
So anyway, coming back to my Be My Bonnet to do with the New Age movement, because when in 2012 I found out about a group. There was an American group called Makara, and they have a lot to answer for.
Never
Funny
heard of them.
enough. Makara is called, and what they initially said was that there were a group of people from the future, from Hawaii, and so they, and in fairness to them, they were amazingly creative. They were creating the most amazing graphics to explain the convolutions of spirituality and the human spirit. And it began, all good things begin well. It began with working on yourself through doing lots of meditations to develop your mind, to develop, to gain sort of abilities. And I'd be doing an hour and a half of meditation a day. Just you can lose your life doing these things. And their credo to begin with was that we only had so many DNA strands.
Oh yes, the DNA strand activation.
Yeah,
I've heard of it,
absolutely.
yes.
That's how it, and this is how it began. And then this would then grow into 12 strands.
Mm-hmm.
So all the exercises, and then you had to work with the Makara, and there was all this convolution. And then from there, they became guardians of Earth. So now they were coming together in groups to activate one of the Earth acupuncture points, energy points, to protect us from the galaxy, because now there's a lot of bodies in the galaxy trying to protect you. So these guys, they were coming together expressly to save the planet. And then a language developed. Then you had dog language, elephant language, all the animals, they were all up there. So all these different races, they were all representing different animals. And then they developed this language where they spoke in, suddenly there would be capitals and small letters within the word. And they were doing their healing, but it wasn't real healing. It became really, really convoluted. And by 2017, it sort of began to change and disperse. And but they're still going. But all those people who were there initially, who were imbibing all of this, they then moved on, and they became their own little gurus. They're all sort of sharing, and so this diaspora. And the other thing was that the Earth would split up into two separate. So you would have the third dimension, and then they would split up into the fifth dimension.
Ascension.
Yeah. So the thing is, there were elements of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these people who were sort of having all these sort of psychic insights, it did have elements of truth. But that isn't what humanity is about. Humanity is about dealing with the garbage inside us, releasing that, and being ordinary.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Just experience life to the full. But these people they were searching something beyond which would make you special. Yeah. And, you know, I was totally engrossed in that, because when I took on board someone new teaching me something, I would be there wholeheartedly. But there was always flexibility within me. So this was a new model of reality. Okay, I'll go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than my present model. But as soon as I realized that this model did not explain reality,
Yeah.
I was out.
Strong opinions lightly held. I think it's always my mantra.
There you go.
And for me, it's been a bit of a pick and mix. And it's looking what I like from here and there, and what similarities I see, and then a process of, you know, I'm a minimalist, and so the simplification of that, taking it down to its core, getting back to the basics, and keeping it simple. That's always worked for me. Whereas, like, when I've followed other people's ideas and beliefs and methods, you know, you might have some success with it, but it feels like you're forcing it. It's all about this gratification again. And I found as I've let go, more seems to happen. The more that I'm ordinary, the more beauty exists in my world. It was, you know, we're having that conversation about manifestation. It's a big one, you know. It's a big industry. It's the one that everyone goes on about. But if we're damaged and, you know, we don't have much light going on, and there's trauma, all we're really going to be, we might have some quick fixes with it, but, you know, it's like the laws of nature, isn't it? There's a positive and there's a negative. And if I'm forcing something and it's not real, and I'm coming from a place of lack because I want something, it might come back to me, but it's not how it's meant to be. I think eventually it kind of like inverts and, you know, brings about some negativity. Whereas, like, I believe that within me, I've got my instructions, or some people say contracts, and I've got everything that I need within here. Once I purify myself, everything that I need is going to come to me already, because it's already agreed. That's what I came here for.
Well, there is that. It's not so black and white. I wish it were, but it's not so black and white. Because all relationships, significant relationships, have been dovetailed way before this incarnation. I mean, according to Charlie, 8,500 years previously. So that's the planning for this, from our perspective, the planning for this incarnation. It's already been looked at 8,500 years beforehand, because it's not just you, it's other people, and it's their life. And there is so much minutiae, like the mother of my first child and I, we were destined to meet, we had to meet. But there were various strands, so that if one failed, another one. So, for example, she lived in London, quite near to where I also lived at one stage. So at one point we lived quite near to each other. Then later on, my mother worked for the best friend of the sister of the woman that I was destined to meet. And that went on for a long time. And I moved away from London. I went to a new place, and she also moved away from London, but she went lower down. And I then made connection with a guy who was her ex-husband. And then finally we met in a party. And so what had to be, and the baby was born. But there had been other connections. So if that party hadn't occurred for whatever reason, eventually I would have met her through the connection of my mother and the people that she worked for.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a friendship there and connection with us as well. So, you know, like, you're destined to meet someone, but you cannot, although we are in a mechanistic universe, there are so many permutations that you cannot, to the minuscule moment, make allowance. Something is the black swan event. Something is going to happen that you haven't foreseen, and so you make sure that events are going to happen by arranging mutual points of interaction for that meeting to happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is preordained from a long time ago, because the permutations are tremendous, especially now. Permutations 5,000 years ago, when there was only, I don't know, a few 100 million in the world, easy peasy. But when you got 7 billion people in the world, nearly 8, the potential for missing each other. Yeah. So there's a lot of planning in the works for something to happen. Where were we going with this? Yes, anyway, so what we mean to do will occur. And when it comes to making wishes, yeah, is not so straightforward. I wished for my first girlfriend, the mother of my child. I'd gone through a couple of years when I was really lonely, really desperate, really sort of lost in myself, really unhappy. And I began to dream the sort of woman that I wanted to meet. And she came along. My best friend at the time, he looked at her astrological chart and says, "You don't want to go there. This is a nightmare." But of course, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes we have to go with people, which is going to be a nightmare, but it's part of what we need to do. It's part of the experience, part of the growth for us, the releasing. So sometimes we have to go into pain before we actually become aware of what's happening inside our organism.
Yeah.
And so I wished for her. I saw her. Did I see her, or was that from a deeper level? At what point is my mechanistic ego creating something?
Mm-hmm.
And at what point does it come from deeper inside me? I found that I used to have objects come my way because I would visualize. I would want something. Oh, I want a fireplace. I want a wood stove. Within the week I had it, exactly what I imagined. I want a nut. Within a week I had it. Oh, I want a filofax. Within a week my mother gives it to me. And ad nauseum, so many. All I had to do was see what I wanted, to have that desire, and it would come my way. But that's small beer. I wanted to be rich. That took a lot longer.
You've got to work for things, haven't you? It's
But
this idea
then,
that
but hold on a minute, because one of my clients used to do Chinese astrology, and he did my chart, and he said, "You're going to be rich." So it was already in my chart that I would be rich later on in my life. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? Because I said, well, and I didn't want to be rich for the sake of being rich. I just wanted to have an easy life. And who doesn't want to be rich in this world anyway? Yeah, everybody. Although I didn't, for most of my life, I wasn't interested in money. I was just interested in doing my courses, my development. It was all about my own personal development, my learning. That's all I cared about. But then, of course, you know, you have children. I have children, and all the problems that come with it, and the needs for money that come with it, and then I want more money. You know, I'm no longer happy just with the little I make. I want more. And like I say, one of my clients looked at this and said, "Oh, I can see that you're going to be rich." Well, what comes first? The pattern of my life that's already written in the stars, or me saying, right, I want to have $1 million?
I think it's all preordained. It's all set out.
Chicken and egg. It's difficult to know where one begins and the other one ends. That it wasn't preordained that I wanted a Filofax,
Yeah.
or that I wanted a wood stove. Yeah. So there are different levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are different levels of creation.
But we're not going to create if we're messed up and we're polluted.
The ego,
We might have some
the
success.
ego cannot create.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
ego has no free will. How can you create if you don't have free will?
Mhm.
The only way that we create is when we are connected with heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, most people are connected with heart. The question is how frequently. I mean, for me, my first love wasn't my first love. My first love was my first sexual desire. But my first love came a bit later, and that one really shook my heart. And then I had a child, and that also shook my heart. So, you know, we go through a number of steps, all the while opening our hearts a little bit more, releasing more of the garbage that's inside all of us. And it gets easier and easier and easier till we hit the biggie. You know. It's like, there's a lot of drilling, and you know, you get a little bit of petrol here and a little bit of gold there, but then one day you hit the jackpot, and that's the one big piece of garbage that is so deeply ingrained in our psyche, that is so much who we are. We are so identified with that we can't see it for the trees. You know, we can't see it. There is that one aspect of us that we just cannot see it, because it's who we are in our ego. It's really the essence of our ego. And for me, it was my mother. And until we release that piece that is holding us back, we're not free. So, if you enjoy our conversations, please subscribe. It helps to make sure that YouTube offers what we offer more widely out there. And come and join our Telegram channel. Bye for now from me.